This is a loosely coupled show with James Hickey and Derek Comartin. We talk about software architecture and design. Make sure to subscribe to get all our latest episodes. I'll start with something because there was somebody just posted something on Twitter. I'm always talking about Twitter.
Of course.
Yesterday, where they mentioned stop organizing this way. I'll show a picture, but I'll describe it if you're just listening audio only. It was essentially organized by technical concern. So I can't remember exactly what it was, but they had like a folder structure that was, you had, I don't know, like say some utils folder with some files in it, and then some services folder with some files in it, and then say some other folder. And then each one of those, like each file inside of those folders were related to the same thing. So let's say you had a products util and a product service and a whatever, but those were organized by technical concern. Versus, and then they were saying to organize instead by putting all the stuff related to products together, or whatever it is that you're dealing with. And while I agree with that sentiment, and I may be doing the original tweet in just like, I'm not doing it justice because it may have said this, but my thing is not necessarily by entity or by thing, but rather by actual capability, feature, whatever the hell it is that is actually useful to people and that you talk about of some action or something that people actually do rather than an entity. I hate the word entity. I don't want to talk about entities anymore. I don't want to see services, air quotes again, of entities. I don't want to see a product service. I don't want to see a product controller. I'm done with anything entity. Can we move past entities and stop thinking about technical crap and deal with organizing stuff and have everything based off of actual use cases, behaviors, things your system actually does? In one of my talks about, I don't know which one it was, I have a screenshot of like MVC, like just creating a new MVC app. Or I can't remember which projects I used on GitHub that show like just kind of the file structure, like by technical concern of what you expect with MVC. And my question was, can you tell me what this app does by looking at this? Right? The answer is no. You cannot. You can tell maybe, oh yeah, this is like an e-commerce website because there's products and orders and some shopping cart controller and that type of entities. And it's like, okay, great, it's an e-com, but what the hell does it do? Like, what actually can you do in this thing?
Yeah.
You can't tell. You have no idea. So, and then you could argue, oh, well, like, what does it really matter? Well, it matters because when I'm trying to navigate code, I don't want to be jumping through hoops and layers of technical things. I just want to be able to say, I need to work on a feature, and that feature is called whatever the behavior is that somebody's going to perform. Let's say in my world that is in transportation, let's say it's a truck driver picking up freight. Well, guess what that's going to be called? Right? Pickup or like something along those lines of what they call that. They'll call it, the pickup. So I'm not going to have a stop entity that has the pickup stuff and then some other layer folder structure that has the pickup stuff. No, put the pickup stuff together. Can we stop putting stuff by technical concern? That was kind of my tweet. And then for the C# people out there, can we start putting more than one class in a file? Like, I know this is like mind-blowing to people that you can actually do this.
It's heresy.
Apparently, people are very angry that I think that I said that.
Yeah, I pretty much agree 100% with what you said. Yeah, and I mean, on the topic of like specifically clean architecture, I disagree with some of how clean architecture is. I don't know if it's how it's done or if it's just certain principles from it, but definitely like the specifically talking about like Uncle Bob's version, or because clean architecture is the book he wrote. But that is like the concept of grouping, not grouping by technical concern, but grouping stuff by capability or behavior or whatever. Definitely that is good. But where I think I disagree, well, where I do disagree is where inside of those now, um, like if you go on GitHub and look at like Steve Smith's or Dallas, I think he has like a clean architecture sample, a few of them potentially. And there's other people who have some like .NET clean architecture samples where, okay, now I'm in, let's say you're in the pickup folder. But then even within there, you would have like a dedicated infrastructure project and then a dedicated domain project. And then they would even have like a core project. And I've tried that. For me, I find the context switching is really hard. Especially, I guess if you do it in projects, right? Because then you have to jump back and forth. And for me, you kind of just did the same thing you didn't want to do at the high level, but then you did it at the low level. So now within that feature, you're still having to switch context a lot. Not as much, right? Like there's a benefit, but so like, yeah, for me, this goes back like 3 years ago, 3 years ago, where I was doing this in the system I was working on. And yeah, kind of decided, well, like this isn't working that great. So I basically just scrapped it, right? So it was like, well, what if you just have like the thing that's doing the thing, call it like a command handler or whatever, and it does the thing. And if you want to do any I/O, then just like put that behind an interface and put the implementation in the same folder as long, you know what I mean? Like as long, like, does it have to be in another project or whatever? No, like as long as you know what you're doing, you understand if I want to unit test the behavior of this thing and I don't want to have it tied to my file system and my database, then I use an interface. But as far as the file structure goes, like all of the files are in one spot, right? So I might have like the command handler or use case, whatever you want to call it. And then I might have like an interface to do a database query to get some information, but then I'll have the actual implementation right there, right next to it. Here we go. In some cases, I might actually put it in the same file, right? Like, like, but like the productivity that you get from that is like, now it's all in one spot. I can see, like, like working
Yeah.
on that. It's hard. It's hard. I think for someone who's worked in the other way and to actually try it this way, where you just stop worrying about all this, like separate your infrastructure stuff from your domain stuff, and they should be in totally different projects, it's based off a good principle that you want to, like, you do want to separate those things, but you can still separate those things like in the same folder. Like that's more of an abstraction concern, not like a structure of your solution concern, right? So I think it's still not, you're still applying the principle at too high of a level, I think, to like get the maximum benefit. So like you said, if you have like one file, and I know Jimmy Bogard has gone this way with a lot of the stuff he's posted and sample applications he's posted. And it's kind of what you're saying. What I'm saying is like, what if you just have one file that's called like truck pickup, and in that one file you have a handler. Maybe that handler has to do a query. Okay, well, just put the class in the same file or do the query in the same file. Okay, well now I need to unit test that handler. I don't want to hit the database. Okay, just create an interface, put it in the same file. Um, and it's, when you do that, it's like, okay, well, maybe the file is getting too big. Okay, well, it takes, you can create new files.
Amazing, right?
So, and I mean, this kind of reminds me of the whole like monolith microservice discussion, right? It's like, it's kind of like starting out with a distributed system as opposed to starting out with everything close together. And then from there, like seeing what works and what doesn't. It's easier to put boundaries around things. It's kind of the same thing.
It is,
like a
yeah.
class level. Really.
Yeah, it's putting boundaries around like a feature. It's letting a feature live on its own. I will say that I've been doing this since 2015, and the biggest, there's a couple benefits. One has always been for us, especially when you need to implement something completely new, you're not touching anything else.
Yeah.
There's generally, yes, there's going to be coupling to some, depending on what you're actually doing, maybe some data, some data source that you're maybe changing something with. But for the most part, you're in isolation a lot. And there's not, like, coupling is way down when you're dealing with vertical slices. So I want to say that we've been, like, again, our project is 5 years old, and it's maybe like 250,000 lines of code. Like, it's not, I don't consider small, not that line of codes are going to mean anything to anybody, but it's not a small system. And I can tell you that how I work today is no different than how it was 3 years ago or 4 years ago in terms of being able to make changes to the system. It's the same. I don't have this service layer or application layer or whatever, like jumping through these layers that are monstrosities. They're not. The system as a whole is a monstrosity of vertical slices, of features. But it's just the way in which we can make change hasn't changed at all.
Yeah.
I mean, the overall complexity of the system and what you can do, obviously, is much larger. But how you implement new stuff is not, it's not any different than it was 3 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, that is definitely the biggest benefit that I've found, is exactly what you said. It's like I can know that if I change, or even if I fix a bug or someone else fixes a bug in feature X, if it was done this way, then it shouldn't impact other features. And that's not so common in the industry. It's actually the opposite. That's
it's just
the common scenario.
It's ultimately coupling, right? Like, you change a behavior in a method that fixes your caller, right? Because there was some bug, but then maybe that totally ruins some other caller.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe they have the expectation. A really easy one, for example, that has come up with us with this is there was goes back to the whole null stuff, is there was a method that we had that returned to null that in certain places was actually checking for null. And then there was a change made because there was no test to say, hey, null's okay. Because in my world, null's never okay. But in this place there was, unfortunately. And there was a null check where, like, the caller, the consumer of this library was like with the method call it had. So it was expecting null, that it could be an option. And we just nonchalant changed implementation so that, this is bad news that it would be returning null. Like, let's stop that. And guess what happened? Right? Like, not good things in that one spot. And that's just because of coupling. Like, it's just, that's what it is. It's just having something that was highly coupled, and that stuff's like so volatile. And we usually have a lot of tests around that stuff, the stuff that is coupled more for that exact reason.
Yeah.
But we did not have a test on null being a possible result.
Yeah. I'll just say, like, probably in closing, the one argument I see the most is well, how do I share code? And sometimes some people feel like, oh, I'm kind of duplicating stuff. I think that really comes down to like the distinction between like cross-cutting concerns as opposed to like actual domain logic. Is for example, like in your domain, just think of like a truck. I'm just using whatever term or a package, whatever. But like a package for one feature is not the same package for another feature. Like the things that a package, the things that are relevant about a package for picking it up are probably not the same things that are appropriate when like it's in transit. I'm just kind of whatever. I don't know the domain that well. And what people tend to want to do comes back to your whole entity thing, right?
Yeah.
It's like you want to make one package entity and share that across all your features. And I think, yeah, well, I mean, what I prefer to do is just have each feature has their own representation of that thing, package or whatever. And yeah, I think that for me is where I think the biggest struggle for people are. It's like, oh, I'm duplicating code, and it's like, no, like this is a different concept. Like this is a different context. It's a different concept. It's a different thing. Like they don't do the same things. Like these methods in this package class that you put here, you don't need those methods over here. So why are you using that? Like that's a sign that it's not the same thing, right? So I think that's the biggest struggle is, oh, well, there's an ID on this thing and there's a name. Okay, well, this one has an ID and maybe a name or whatever. Maybe that's a bad example, but definitely with the ID, people are like, oh, why are there IDs everywhere? It's like, why don't I just have the one thing? And I think that's where, yeah, people struggle with that.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. It's this fixation on entities and these things being I don't know, entities. I think that's the biggest weird thing right now is everything's an entity service. Like the two words I hate the most. Entity service.
What about a entity factory service?
Yeah, a factory entity factory.
Oh man.
All right, well I'll stop complaining about entities.
Oh man. Yeah, that's great.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Loosely Coupled Show. If you did, please subscribe for more on software architecture and design.